Okay, so I had this guy reach out to me earlier this week, and he is essentially looking for help to try and track down some photos, images in general, to help him create like a photo montage that helps tell the story of how his house had evolved over time. I didn't go into details with him, but I kind of got the impression it was like going to sit on the wall in some framed pictures or be in like a photo book or something like that after he'd renovated his house. Anyway, I thought I'd use this week's video to share the information that I gave him with you guys, so that if you're getting clients sort of reach out and ask questions about how they can do this, you can be like, I know exactly what you need to do or where you need to go. So let's start with my top 5 resources. Number 1, top of the list, has to be detail plans. Now, I won't go into detail, pun not intended, but I won't go into detail as to what they are. But essentially, they kind of act as a timestamp or a snapshot in time of what the property looked like, often right down to the detail of like fish ponds, water tanks, verandas, and all of that sort of stuff. And if you're really lucky, it can go back as far as like 1911, sometimes the 1920s, like really early dates. Now, number 2 is QImagery. QImagery has a heap of old aerial photos. Now, I'd probably suggest maybe 80–90% of the aerial photos, which go back to like 1936 often, but 80 or 90% of those aerial photos are just absolute duds. The quality's too poor, the plane was going through a cloud at the time, took the photo or whatever, and they're just an absolute waste of time. But every now and then you'll find a cracker of an image, so you can actually access those old images there. And sometimes the 1946 aerial photo there is better than the quality of the one on council's websites on the interactive mapping. Number 3 is Corley Explorer. Now, embarrassingly, I had a client the other day, well, this is not the other day, maybe a few weeks ago. I went back to him and said, yo, we need to prove that this balustrade is not original. Looking at it, it's clearly not original. Do you mind if I pop out, get some photos, find the evidence for myself to be able to help us with council? And the building designer, hats off to him, the building designer emailed back and went, oh, here's a Corley Explorer image that shows a different balustrade on the front of the house. And I was like, oh, rookie mistake. I should have gone to Corley Explorer. But because, like I said, 80–90% of the time you don't get a hit, it's just often I discount it and it's not worth it. But yeah, strongly recommend check out Corley Explorer, because if you get a hit, it's a front-on shot from like the 16s or 70s of the house, which is amazing. Now, number 4 on my resource list is probably going to be Trove. Trove and I, we have a love-hate relationship. Like, Trove is an absolute gold mine of information, like newspaper articles which have funeral notices, birth notices, all of that sort of stuff, aerial photos, street photos, just announcements, like anything you can think of, it can be found in Trove. But it's an absolute biatch to search through. So what I'd suggest is actually go in, search for your properties, a keyword search the exact address, and then kind of progressively step backwards from there. So go your specific site, then your street, then the surrounding streets, then like local landmarks like churches and things like that. Because often you'll find photos, and I had this exact situation last week, you'll often find photos of a landmark under construction that show through to your property in the background. So the other day I had this property at the Grange. We looked up this photo. The photo was from like 1905 or something like that. And it was the local hall, the first version of the local hall that was under construction. And if you looked in the background, you could see this vacant little hill where our house was, or where it was going to be built. So we could say, okay, well, the house post-dated that point in time. So yeah, you can find some great information there. Like I said, love-hate relationship though, because it's a biatch to use. So one thing you could do, there is actually a Facebook group that you can join, which people just chatter in there about tips on how to use it. You can ask questions, all of that sort of stuff. So that's a good option to look at. Now, the final top resource for me is Brisbane Images. So if you go to Google and type in Brisbane Images, apparently it now comes up as the #1 search result. And that essentially is Brisbane City Council's archives version of Trove. So you go in there and you have a bucket load of different images. So Brisbane, I can't remember the exact statistics, but we were one of the only, or the only city council to have a photographer on staff that went out and took all the photos of infrastructure works and all that sort of stuff. Can't quite remember the exact story, but basically it was super duper rare to have a staff member whose only role was to go around and take photos of things being built around the city throughout time. And I think that went through to like the 1960s, 70s, I can't remember when it was. But basically it went through to more recent times. So there is a bucket load of photos out there you can actually access, if again you can take the time and have the patience to search through, and again starting with your site and working backwards. So that's like the super duper quick overview of my top 5 resources. What I'm going to do when I go back and edit this video is I'm going to, in text form, just mind dump all of the other resources that I think people could potentially use, going way back to the early days through to present days, to try and get that visual summary, or summary is the best way of saying it, of how the house has evolved over time. Now, where do you go from here? So if you go to our YouTube channel, check out either the online videos, I think it's online videos, not maybe online tools video playlist, and also the playlist that's titled like house dating or how to date a house or something like that. It's definitely got house and the word dating in there. Check out those two playlists and there'll be a series of videos in there that dive into each one of these tools in more detail. So I know definitely I've covered detailed plans in multiple videos, at least 2 if not 3 videos. QImagery I've definitely covered in a video. Probably need to update that video because I think that was done way back in like 2018 or something like that. Corley Explorer, I've definitely covered Corley Explorer. Trove and Brisbane Images, I don't think I've done videos on those because, like I said, love-hate relationship. I don't feel like I quite have mastered how to use those sites and therefore I have the right to be able to talk about them. So I don't think I've got videos on those. But then I've definitely got videos on other things like Streetscape, the timeline feature in Street View and Vexel and a heap of other things. So anyway, I'll link those in so that you guys can access those resources later and do a bit more information or digging yourselves. Okay, that covers off this week's video and everything I want to talk about. As I always like to say, until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got 3. Number 1, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site-specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number 2, Brisbane Town Planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number 3, what was my number 3? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all.